Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to room 6. Now 5 paper will be presented in this session. I want to remind time limit for each presentation is 10 minutes and extra 5 minutes for questions and answers. Our first paper will be presented by Fran HASSENCAHL. Yes.
It's good to be back in Turkey, if only virtually. I recall very pleasant conferences at Anadolu University and at universities in Istanbul. And inshallah, we will eventually see each other again and enjoy interactions. Today, I'm going to be talking about the stages of being foreign. And this is in regard to 2 films, Inshallah, Dimanche, and Bent Keltoum. And the research question that, wait, why doesn't it want to advance? Here we go. I'm looking at these 2 films from the perspective that, assuming films reflect human experience, I look to see how these films show the immigrant experience in the context of the model of culture shock. And I look at the 2 main characters, 2 women in the film, both which experience immigrant situations. For purposes of time, I'll only look at Zawina and Inshallah Dimanche because we're limited in time. In context, these films are made by what we refer to as Bur Cinema. And this is a group of filmmakers, primarily from the Maghreb, from North Africa. And they have made films and had lots of issues in terms of resources and training. And most of them have made their films in France, and particularly with help of French public television. They generally share their memories about a childhood under colonialism, the kind of struggles that occurred, study abroad, and their own experiences in immigration to Europe. And most of these are second-generation men. However, the film I'm showing is made by a woman. In terms of Bur film, it deals with questions of identity and community identification. You see themes of exile and the kinds of situations that immigrants experience in terms of their own confusion, the kinds of treatment that they get, the problems they have with residency. And this becomes particularly a problem for women coping with family traditions and the expectations of the family, having a lack of job skills, and for second generation, particularly in France, outside Paris, in the urban housing projects, lots of poverty, difficulties in finding jobs, subpar education for youth. And this also comes in terms of reflected in violence in the housing projects. Basically, in terms of immigrant dreams, dreams and realities sometimes clash, and it becomes very difficult to juggle the cultural identity of being a dispossessed Algerian in France. And women are a particular disadvantage because, number one, they're economically dependent on the men in their family. They don't have a lot of social control. They are also pretty much internalized to follow patriarchal norms in order to maintain peace at home. And that often means that they're isolated in their home. And one of the issues in the film I'm discussing is Zawina's isolation, her inability to connect with other individuals, particularly when it comes to the Eid, and she's looking to, with her children, celebrate with someone. She is not able to find another Algerian family that she can celebrate with. And in fact, the finding has to go contrary to her husband's admonitions that she not leave the house. And this in some respects reflects director's experience in terms of immigration, and her family immigrated from Algeria to northern France. There was not a lot of discussion in her family about what had happened in Algeria. She only learned in adulthood that her father had been in prison in regard to the resistance. She always remembered her family never totally unpacking. She makes the comment, our hands were always on our suitcases, with the kind of concept that someday we're going to return, which actually rarely ever happens. And it happened less after the Family Reunification Act and passed in '74. And that made it possible for male workers who had been recruited to fulfill and take jobs that would have been filled by French men, but these men were either incapacitated or killed during the World War II. So there was a shortage of labor. And so basically they imported men from the former colonies, Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria. But they finally decided it would be better perhaps to have their families come. And so they passed legislation so this could occur. My paper is based on research by an anthropologist called Vero Olberg. He coined the term culture shock, which is common now in our vocabulary. The idea that we are, in effect, a fish out of water. We're in a new culture. We don't have the kinds of symbols of social intercourse. We don't know how to tip. We don't know how to greet people. We wonder about using the bathrooms, etc. The preliminary stage that he discusses is a stage where basically you're preparing, you're saying goodbye, you have some anticipation, you have some regret. And in the two films, only Zowina is in this situation. You see here a still, she's saying goodbye to her mother and sisters. She wants to run back to, she's on the gangplank, she wants to run back to embrace her mother and sisters. Her sisters are telling her, you have to join your husband, you must join your husband. Her mother-in-law is physically prodding and pushing her along the gangplank, and she is experiencing a great deal of anxiety and sorrow to leave her family and to go to a new place. Now, when she gets to the new place, she's basically in what Olberg calls the spectator stage. And you're basically busy with the new sights and sounds. Initially, people help you. And I have experienced this when I was a guest lecturer in Syria at Aleppo. Eventually, you're on your own and you have to deal with things on your own. Your initial excitement begins to blur and you start to get information overload. You start to develop confusion about the money or about situations that you're not entirely sure how to handle. Now we have here a still of Zowina. She's overwhelmed at the grocery store with the choices, and she obviously does not understand the money, and she doesn't quite understand the amount of money that her husband has given her and the prices. And so this is creating a feeling of just, oh, what do I do? How do I handle this? And she ends up purchasing more food than she has money for. Eventually, you move into the increasing participation stage. You have good days and bad days, and you find you're pretty much on your own, and you have sort of an alternative here. You can either cope and continue on, or you can fall into what is termed by Colvero culture shock. And this is a major problem that most companies, militaries, and study abroad and in America, Peace Corps, people try to particularly work with is to avoid having people fall into culture shock. One of the things that here you have Zowina, who has met a friend, a neighbor who works in a cosmetic factory and has given her some cosmetics. And she attempts to be a French woman by applying some lipstick and makeup. And when her husband finds out, he gets very angry and he smashes her makeup. And of course, this is the tearful kind of confrontation. We have here a situation where eventually, because her attempts to adjust the culture, the fact that she is not allowed to interact or go outside the home, she also is dealing with a very controlling mother-in-law and a husband who basically lets the mother-in-law call the shots. So she begins to fall into a situation of great depression, and she starts to be lonely. She starts to feel, I want to go home. You have here a shot of her. She's hanging out the clothes, but she's also weeping and remembering Algeria. Now, one can stay in the culture shock stage. Hopefully, you move into the adaptation stage and you begin to get some ability with the language. You begin to get a little more comfortable with the host culture, which in turn makes you more energetic and more task oriented. And we have here a situation where Zawina eventually gathers up her courage and leaves the house and takes the local bus and goes in search of trying to meet another Algerian family. She does meet the family, but unfortunately their interaction does not turn out to be successful. But the fact that she has gone outside the house and in effect chosen some liberty is a major turning point in her activity. And in the final scenes, we have Zawina telling her husband, and he accepts it, that she will take the children to school. Here before, he had always walked their 3 children to school, left her at home. And so granted, these are small moves toward independence on her part, but it does show that she is starting to make some adjustment to the new culture and to also share the urging of her friend, her neighbor, the cosmetics giver, that she needs to take more opportunities to satisfy her own concerns and to also, in effect, be somewhat more liberated. And I justify looking at a film in regard to Fury and Fury's book, Visual Cultures and Critical Theory. And the image is a component in a complex configuration of political, cultural, and social discourses and ideologies formulating a visual culture. And it's my argument that although certainly the director did not particularly think of Oberg, but you can look at the stages of being foreign and see them playing out in the film, because in effect, the images, the story, the dialogue all reflect what happens to most immigrants, and I'm talking about immigrants broadly, encounter when they are attempting to cope with a culture that they're not familiar with a culture that often they have to work with because there is no possibility of return. Afghans particularly are in this boat. And this is a way to illustrate and to show the kind of experiences and hopefully develop some kind of empathy for those individuals that are struggling to adapt to a new culture and to be able to cope in that culture. And I think I've come to my 10-minute limit.
Yeah,